What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What's up, Fantasy Points? We are back for Outside the Box week 6, a little bit earlier than usual this week. I have a wedding that I'm going to out of town tonight, so we gotta start a little earlier. Got to go out a little bit shorter. Scott's shaking his head. Not a fan of during season weddings. Is that
Should
what
be
you're shaking
illegal.
head about? Should be illegal. I have to admit, Scott, I got married on September 13th in 2019, so I actually had a wedding during NFL, but it was a Friday night wedding, so it's okay because it was Friday night. So
it was Friday the 13th.
It was Friday the 13th. Yeah, it was a Friday the 13th wedding. So I think I'm
no
exempt.
Bad luck there.
I'm exempt from the head shake. Yeah, we are still together more than 5 years later. Actually had our 5-year anniversary on Friday the 13th again this year, which is kind of cool. Yeah. We're gonna go position by position here, looking at the chalk, trying to find some of the best contrarian plays at each position as well. I told Scott that I need to keep it short today because I have the wedding. I need to leave in about an hour, 25 minutes from now, or at least start getting ready to leave. And Scott said, "Oh, this is not the week for it." So Scott, you have a lot to say about this slate. I mean, it's a short slate at least.
Yeah, I don't know. There's just I don't like slates like this where there's just so many players I like and so many players I like that no one else is on. There's just a lot of different things to sort through. I think there are a few nice little cheat code efficiency hacks, such as, you see Lamar Jackson there at the top. I think you can get away with a Derrick Henry or pass catchers, Baltimore, Washington pass catchers on every lineup. Like that's one of those this week. But yeah, no, I think this is a pretty tricky slate, to be honest. And there's just a lot of ground to be covered.
There is. Well, then we will have to be efficient in covering that ground. Apologies to all of you that you're not going to get Scott going for 2 hours today, but we'll get as much.
Well, that's why you have the week 6 DFS main slate breakdown in all its glory, probably 6,000 words or so. So subscribe to Fantasy Points, check that out. Join us in Discord, watch my show with Johnny tomorrow morning.
Yeah, you can find all that content anyway. Promo code OTB25 for 25% off any Fantasy Points product. So if you want to get access to Scott's article, that would be under the NFL Premium package. You can also use the little box in the left-hand corner of the screen to easierly, man, that's not even a word, to access it pretty easily there. Check that out. Okay, we're going to start at quarterback here, Scott, and the chalk is not all that chalky. Lamar Jackson against the Commanders, 7,800, 12% ownership. Jalen Hurts against the Browns, 7,200, 12%. Justin Fields, 12% against the Raiders at 5,800. I guess Dak Prescott, the only other quarterback above double digits, 6,700 against Detroit, projected for 10% ownership. So starting with those four, do you have any issue with the ownership on any of those four? Or are you going to be significantly overweight on any?
I probably like Jaden Daniels the most of any quarterback this week. I mean, you look at quarterbacks by fantasy points per dropback, and it's Lamar Jackson all the way at the top, and then a hair behind him is Jaden Daniels, and then there's a big teardrop. And the big issue with both quarterbacks is dropbacks per game is lower for Daniels actually. And this just looks like the perfect spot for him to be getting, 45 dropbacks instead of his typical 34 per game. And so you can just do the math there. Massive upside. Second biggest pass funnel. Baltimore's giving up the most passing yards per game. I think he's easier to fit. I don't think game script is as much of a concern as it is for Lamar, where you really see like it could just be a Derrick Henry week, in which case it brings Lamar down. I think Jaden's easier to stack. But no, I love Lamar. He's been on fire this year. Jalen Hurts, he's the cash quarterback on FanDuel. I think he's a strong play, good upside. I don't know that I'd have him as high as the other two we just mentioned. Justin Fields, really strong value. You can tell by our point per dollar value there. We really like him, but I'm not really worried about him killing me. And I think there's better quarterback spots relative to ownership. I really like Dak Prescott this week. I think it's the perfect spot for him. That game could just go nuclear, and he's just easier because it's a more condensed offense relative to Detroit, where also, there's no threat of the running backs, or not as much of a threat of the running backs scoring multiple times. I like Jordan Love a lot. The crazy thing about Jordan Love is like he's not even playing well. I just like tweeted out a chart and he ranks dead last in accurate throw rate this year. Will Levis actually ranks second best. Depth of target plays a role in that, but still not really playing all that great. But he's been super productive for fantasy. I think even if he's not the most skilled quarterback, Matt LaFleur is just a god. Since week 11 of last year, averages 22.5 DraftKings fantasy points per game, ranks behind only Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, maybe tied with Dak Prescott. But so I like him. Kirk Cousins as well. I think we have Darnell Mooney, Drake London popping as two of the best wide receiver values on the slate. So that's an easy dub stack. The dude just threw for 500 plus passing yards, has a really strong matchup again this week, and only 5%. That seems a little weird, but those are my thoughts right now on the top 7.
Okay, so I mean, outside of the top 7, I think Spencer Rattler we at least need to touch on at 4,000. Do you have any interest in min-priced Spencer Rattler?
I think he's interesting. I think it's interesting that you went with him over Jake Haener, and what you're hearing from the insiders is he's really impressed them in practice. This was the former consensus 101 in his should be draft class. A lot of film experts saw a lot of upside for him, really liked him. They're down their center. They're down their left guard. They're probably down their right guard. Up against Todd Bowles, who's a nightmare for rookie quarterbacks. I don't love it personally. I could see it. I know JM to Win made the argument that like playing Rattler is really a fade of Lamar, Dak, Jaden dropping 26 plus fantasy points. I think the odds are really good. One of those quarterbacks is going to do that. I like Will Levis more straight up personally, 4,800, only 800 more. I worry about the shoulder injury with him. I think that's a real concern, but outside of that, it's just the matchup, the schematic matchup, the matchup plus schematic matchup for both of his wide receivers. And like, who is he? I just said he ranked second among all quarterbacks in accurate throw rate last year, but he is second worst in turnover worthy throw rate. And you saw that last year, where first in hero throw rate by a landslide, worst in turnover worthy throw rate by a landslide. Basically, I've been saying he's drunk Jameis Winston on steroids. And so, he's kind of hard to trust, but you have that upside, certainly in that matchup, the spike week potential for him. So I do like me some Will Levis.
Yeah, I like Will Levis. I think he's pretty interesting at 4,800. I like that he is just, Spencer Rattler getting some ownership here. Projected for actually the same ownership. I'd be pretty surprised if Rattler doesn't get more than Will Levis, just because he's kind of the shiny new toy, min priced. So I do like Levis a bit better there. Kyler Murray, I think, I don't know if you mentioned Kyler Murray, but he sort of looks interested in me against Green Bay. Do you have any interest there?
Yeah, he's fine. He just didn't make the cut for me.
Okay, because we have some great quarterbacks on this slate. So I think you said Jaden Daniels is your favorite on the slate.
He's probably the quarterback I wind up with the most exposure to. I mean, we'll see. I have to build still. Maybe it's Dak or something, but I would wager it's going to be Jaden.
Yeah. And Justin Fields, I mean, it's tough because Fields, looks good. 5,800 against the Raiders defense feels good for Fields. But then you look at the rest of the quarterbacks on the slate. I kind of think I end up fading just because there's so many other quarterbacks that I like the correlations better, that I feel like I can double stack just in great game environments. So I'm not sure that I end up actually getting to a ton of Justin Fields just because I like all the other quarterbacks so much better. I think we've covered quarterbacks pretty well. In limited time, I think we probably more important to spend more time on other positions, unless you have anything else you want to say about quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'll just say Baker Mayfield's a little interesting to me at 2%. It's like a worst possible or a bottom 5 matchup. And then you worry about Spencer Rattler being able to keep pace, but still, like, dude, he's been balling out this year. He ranks 3rd in fantasy points per game, 2nd in fantasy points per opportunity, 2nd in passer rating. He has obvious leverage off of one of the chalkiest plays in the slate in Bucky Irving and Buccaneers defense. So I just think he deserves a shout. We have a lot of people who watch this show are mostly just playing Millie Maker lineups. I think he's great for that.
Yep, I think he makes sense in that context. All right, let's move on. Talk about some running backs. And you just mentioned the chalkiest running back on the slate is expected to be Bucky Irving. No Rashad White this week, projecting for 17 fantasy points. 400, I believe that would make him the best fantasy point per dollar play on the slate. 32% ownership. How do you feel about 32% ownership for Bucky Irving?
Yeah, I'll just say it's like really not a great matchup. Saints are tough against running backs, but still, like, undeniably, that's the running back who should be highest owned this week.
Yeah. Not really involved in the passing game so far this year. And I think that
that's because, like, Rashad White, the only thing he's good at is the passing game, and he's really, really good at that. But so is Bucky Irving. He had like 58 catches last season. So I do think we see him in that bell cow role this week.
That's really promising. Any concerns about like the pass blocking, keeping him off the field in those passing down? Like, do you think there's any chance they bring in another running back? I don't know if they have anybody else who's great at
Sean Tucker. No, I don't think he's anything. And then again, pass blocking, you're not running routes if you're so it's kind of like empty calorie snaps anyway.
Good point. Looks good at 32%. Bijan Robinson against Carolina, 6,600, 28% ownership. I'm really struggling with the Bijan Robinson spot just because it's obviously an elite matchup. I still think he's an elite talent, but I think he might be actually injured. I don't know. How do you feel about Bijan Robinson this week?
No, that's kind of exactly how I feel. So Atlanta was one of the more run heavy offenses the first 3 weeks. Wasn't super effective. Part of that might have just been Cousins didn't look fully healthy in week 1. Last 2 weeks, they've been one of the most pass heavy offenses. You've seen a decline in volume for Bijan. I've been saying it's just he's hurt. He has this shoulder injury, and then more importantly, what is it? An ankle hamstring injury. Yeah, that's right. And so I circled this. I'm like, oh, he is going to go nuclear. I think the coaching staff has this matchup circled as like the perfect get right spot for him in the running game. You know, coaches really kind of care about that. Like, no. We need to establish the run. We need to be multifaceted. And then he popped up on Thursday, limited with that hamstring. And so like I was hoping the mini bye would get him fully healthy. And so that's the only real concern there. Like, I think he's going to play. It's just, is he going to be the Bijan we all drafted him to be? Probably. I don't know. I'm not the injury expert, but that would just be the one concern.
I will say, I think you actually mentioned the Bijan injury prior to last week, and he was on a showdown slate, and I went all in on Bijan and then felt pretty dumb watching the game because it was like, oh, they're using Tank Dell when they need to get down the field in 3 minutes. They're using Tank Dell as Tyler Algier as the passing game running back, and that's clearly not Tyler Algier's role. So it's like, clearly Bijan is hurt. Now we're a week later. I don't know. I have some concerns there, but I think we've laid it out pretty nicely. It's like, if he is healthy, this is a smash spot for Bijan Robinson. Last week he definitely was not. Maybe he got healthy in a week. I don't know. I don't know what to do there exactly. It scares me a little bit, but 28% doesn't seem like the price tag, 6,600 too. Like you said, you circled the game, probably circled it, expecting him to be 7,500 in this game. And he's 6,600. So the price tag is really nice. Really makes it a tough spot because he is either an elite play or a way too over-owned for a guy who's not going to see a full workload. Hard to get a read on that. Tony Pollard, 6,000 projected for 26% ownership. Great matchup with the Colts. How do you feel about Pollard?
Yeah, I think it's a great spot for him. He is a timeshare back, but he is getting the better end of that, particularly inside the 10-yard line. He's kind of looked better. Still, it's a timeshare back at 26% ownership. So, and Will Levis and his pass catchers are much lower owned. So that's not one, like, I don't think he can bury me.
So you think you'd be at least a light fade on Tony Pollard at 26%?
Yeah, undeniable value, but factor in upside versus ownership. I'm okay getting away from that.
Chuba Hubbard against Atlanta, 6,300, projected for 24% ownership, has been really good since Andy Dalton took over. I think at least 15.5 half PPR points, 17.5 full PPR points at least in every game that Andy Dalton has started. Now facing Atlanta in one of the chalkier games on the slate. How do you feel about Chuba Hubbard?
Yeah, I haven't talked to John Proctor about this, but I'm guessing tomorrow morning he's gonna say something like, "Bro," I'm like, and Hubbard's a good play, and he's like, "Bro, what are you talking about? Like, we're all in on Hubbard this week. Like, Hubbard plus Andy Dalton means must play." And like you could see that, like, since Dalton took over, ranked sixth in XFP per game, sixth in fantasy points per game. He's played great. He ranks behind only Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley in yards per carry. This is why I have so much exposure to Jonathan Brooks, who hasn't seen the field, because this Dave Canales RB1 role is so valuable. I think there's some slight game script concerns here, and Carolina took a step back last week, but still, yeah, I think he's a great play, really strong value.
Just looking up Chuba Hubbard, 43.5% route participation, 17 targets on the season. So some passing game usage for Hubbard. So maybe even in a game, if they do get behind, still we could see some usage for Hubbard there. And I think it's been a little bit better with Andy Dalton there also. So maybe not.
Well, it's like what is it? A 3 to 5 carry split, and then a 1.5 to 1 target split. So that could be the one hole you could poke in it.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, and then outside of those four, we don't have anybody over 20. I guess let's talk about Antonio Gibson, because he comes on now. He's suddenly no reminder Stevenson. He is 5,300, so the value is pretty good there. Not the best matchup with the Texans. How do you feel about Gibson?
Yeah, not the best matchup. You also have a rookie quarterback making his first career start. The lowest implied point total of the slate, 15.5, which is just embarrassing. But I think the workload's going to be great. Patriots, very sneaky, ranked fourth in rushing yards, 17th in running back receptions this year. He's averaging 5.9 yards per carry on the season. He had 67 receiving yards 2 weeks ago. But I think there's like a bunch of these guys, a bunch of these sort of running backs about to get a workhorse or bell cow role that didn't have it last week or the week before. And I mean, he's fine. He's just not a screaming must play to me.
All right, let me just open it up to you now. Who are some of the running backs outside of those top five that you have the most interest in?
I don't know. Alvin Kamara, I've kind of struggled with. Again, they're down their center, right guard, left guard. That's not great. He did have 13 catches against the Buccaneers in one game last year. Usage has just been insane. Production has been insane. I'm not playing Najee. J.K. Dobbins, I think, is a great value. You've really seen his volume sort of skyrocket, and now no Gus Edwards, and he's getting the tackles back. So maybe the efficiency is there as well.
But maybe Kamani Vidal is better than Gus Edwards. Any concerns there?
I mean, he probably is, but I think Dobbins is better than him by a wide margin. So,
yeah.
So I think he's a great. I don't know. You're supposed to ask me about guys in particular.
Oh, I forgot. We have a new thing.
The hard work.
Yeah. All right. Make me do the hard work. How about either of these Detroit running backs? Nice matchup. Dallas has been pretty bad against the run so far this year. Dave Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, both coming in. Gibbs 7%, Dave Montgomery 8%. Who is your preference between the two? Do you like either of them? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really great spot. This is a top 10 matchup on paper, and then Dallas is without three linebackers, including Micah Parsons and Eric Kendricks. I think Gibbs' red zone role is better than it gets credit for. And I think he has the most upside with the other running back, David Montgomery. I could see it, and he works as leverage. It's just you count back over his last, 15 or so games. How many times has he had 100 rushing yards and a touchdown? Or how many times has he had 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns? And it's like pretty infrequent, pretty rare. I know he's getting a touchdown in like every single game, but just for that upside, we haven't seen that too much. So I would lean Gibbs, and I think he's a strong play overall. Where is Saquon Barkley on this list?
Saquon Barkley coming in at 8% ownership.
Okay, and where is Derrick Henry coming in?
Derrick Henry coming in at 7% ownership.
So that's silly. Derrick Henry is my favorite GPP play of the slate by far. I think he goes absolutely nuclear. He works his leverage off of a chalky Lamar Jackson. Like we have a tool coming out probably Monday or Tuesday to the fantasy points data suite. It's nothing spectacular. It's just like a grid view of fantasy points scored, or the same one by XFP. And if you just like click on Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, it's basically like either or, right? And so like if Derrick Henry gets 20 plus carries, Zay Flowers is going to get 10 plus targets. If not, Zay Flowers isn't going to do jack shit. And so, yeah, to me, this just looks like a Derrick Henry week. It's an amazing matchup for a player who's averaging more yards after, or more yards after contact per game than like all but 4 running backs have in total yards. It's a great schematic matchup. He's the most game script sensitive player in history. It's great game script this week. And so he is my favorite GPP play of the slate, probably at any position. And then Saquon might be a close second. Works his leverage off of Jalen Hurts, but it's also just look at how insanely productive he's been this year. He's also very game script sensitive. He's getting good game script this week. Matchup is slightly favorable. Certainly doesn't scare me at all. Can be stacked with Eagles D up against Deshaun Watson, who is terrible. And so, yeah, I really like the upside on those guys.
I've seen people in chat saying it's a double pay up at running back week. How do you feel about that? Because I think we're going to see some chalk condensing around Bucky Irving, Tony Pollard, maybe Gibson to an extent, but I think we have some nice value running backs. I think it makes some sense to flip the script, go to some of these, like go with the double elite running back. How do you feel about that this week?
Yeah, we'll have to play around with that in our builds. That's
interesting. Agreed. Who else? James Conner against Green Bay. 6,800.
I think it was interesting. We saw this big uptick in usage last week. He played on 83% of the team snaps, up from 64%, had 96% of the backfield opportunities, up from 57%. Didn't really translate into fantasy production, but like that's when I see something like that, that gets the gears moving. And it's like, this could be a uniquely great week to play him. Nothing really about the matchup stands out too much. I guess he works as leverage on some of those guys, but yeah, he wasn't super high on my list, but I don't know.
What
James Conner always has 100 yards plus 2 touchdown potential.
Josh Jacobs on the other side, again, leverage on several Green Bay players, going to get some ownership here. He's 6,700, projects pretty well, 10% ownership. How much interest do you have in Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, not much, to be honest. He's in like a 60, 40, 55, 45 split. By snap share, by XFP, you factor in the goal line work, maybe like 63 versus whatever the rest is. Thanks. Yeah, I think last week was the week to play him. I question the upside. So,
okay. Let me see who else. Oh, Joe Mixon, I think is sort of interesting because nobody thought he was going to play this week. Now it looks like he's probably a full go. Had really elite usage when he was playing earlier in the year. You'd expect them to be playing with the lead. Any interest there in Joe Mixon at low ownership?
Yeah, I think he's a great play. Per sources, he's going to be full go, no limitations. Expecting a lot of usage for him. Texans are 6.5 point favorites up against a rookie quarterback making his first career start. New England is good against the run. They rank 7th best in yards per carry allowed, but still bottom 12 in fantasy points per game allowed because, all this game script, which we should be expecting. And you look at what Mixon has done. You look at what Slowick has done, right? Dating back to last year, he's always been frustratingly run heavy, way more run heavy than we've wanted. And that's with absolute trash running backs. And so he gets his hand on Joe Mixon for one game and one game only. What do we see? 30 carries. Even the next week, he only played like 47% of the snaps. He had 9 carries, 5 targets. So I think that's a great call. Super flying under the radar. So really good play at 2% ownership.
Yeah, we'll have to think about including him in at least one of our builds. No, so here's the ultimate like Neil Galaxy Brain play that you probably shouldn't do, and I probably shouldn't do, but I probably will anyway. Tyler Algier, because we talked about the Bijan potential injury, both the shoulder and a hamstring, feels like if we knew Bijan was going to play less than a quarter, if we knew Bijan was only going to play one quarter, which just hear me out, we don't know that obviously, but if we knew that, Tyler Algier at 5,300 would be really good play against Carolina. He would probably get a significant amount of ownership if we knew Bijan was limited to that extent. We just saw him last week. They weren't using him late in the game, in the fourth quarter, in overtime, when they really needed to win. They weren't using Bijan late in the game. They were using Tyler Algier because Bijan was hurt enough. Now he has had some time to recover, but who knows? I think a re-aggravation of his injury is very much in play for Bijan. I would like it a lot better if Tyler Algier was 4,400, a lower price tag, but I still have some interest just because of the matchup and because of Bijan's limitations and because he's going to have 0% ownership. Is that too cute for you?
Yeah, this is where we butted heads a lot last year. Is like I just never play RB2s, right? Or especially RB2s who don't catch passes.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to get there, but I think it's a great sign that we made it to week 6 before you touted your first
Running back.
I have a Galaxy Brain running back play. It doesn't feel all that Galaxy Brain to me, but it's Austin Eckler. If Brian Robinson sits out, he's a true game time decision. I think he's going to sit out though. Eckler, you remember last year played like shit, but he had that ankle injury in week 1, and like by his own admission, like he was just never right after that. But he looks great this year. He led the team in receiving yards the first 2 weeks. He's averaging 7.9 yards per carry this season. I've talked about this before. This was the case in Arizona where when Cliff would always go with a committee of 2 backs. And then once one back went down, the other running back would get like a 99% snap share. And so it's like Christian McCaffrey, legitimate, like usage only seen by Christian McCaffrey and Kingsbury backups. And across the industry, other analysts are saying, no, this is a committee. Jerry McNichols has been getting a lot of work. And that's like true-ish. It's just that, these were extreme blowouts. So I don't know how true that is. You look when Eckler missed with a concussion, Robinson had 17 of 22 opportunities before the fourth quarter. And then you look at last week's game, Robinson went down in the second quarter. And then Eckler played on at least 66% of the snaps in 3 of the next 4 drives. That's like pretty bell cow-ish. And then like, even if not, it's just a negative passing script. And you saw in like week 1 where like the running backs combined for, I don't know, 67% yardage market share. So yeah, I think it's interesting at 1%. I'm surprised it's not more popular.
I love that call. I would love it so much more if this was an afternoon game instead of a 1 o'clock game. Like if it was a later afternoon game, it would be like the ultimate, just like flip onto all of the Eckler you can if we got the Brian Robinson is out news, because nobody would be on it. But even if we do get the inactives report an hour and a half before 1 o'clock, I still think that's a strong play. Like if we do get Brian Robinson out, I still think he's going to be like way lower owned than he should. So I actually love that call. Regardless, if we get the news that Brian Robinson is out, would you play him at all with Brian Robinson in?
No.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's I think that is a very strong Galaxy Brain. Honestly, not even like I said, not that Galaxy Brain, but nobody's on it right now. If we get that news,
two others, like I'm not going to play them, so don't tail me on this. But like Dowdle as like leverage, like imagine he's the one who goes off, and it's not CD, it's not Dak, it's negative. It super negatively correlated with Detroit's running backs. He just had this huge game last week. Trey Sermon, I can't play him, but the dude did rank 2nd in XFP last week, top 6 in fantasy points. I'd say Dowdle's probably just with the obvious leverage, but I'm not going to be able to get there. But
20 carries last week, pretty insane.
I know.
Real usage, kind of fun to see that. Yeah, I actually wrote him up in my game by game breakdown, but almost deleted it. Like I wrote it up and still almost, because like, man, Detroit.
That means so I feel like that means we got to get on him, because like everyone feels that way, and it's just like such obvious leverage. I have a ton of best ball exposure to the guy, so would be sick.
Javonte Williams, 5,500, pretty involved in the passing game so far this year. Any interest in Javonte?
Yeah, his upside doesn't scare me, but he's a strong value, especially on FanDuel. I'm not going to play him, but I get it. I wrote him up.
Okay. Najee, 16% ownership. Yeah, 16% ownership.
I think the whole offensive line is hurt. Jalen Warren's coming back. He sucked ass. I hate him.
Fuck him. He sucked ass. I hate him. Okay, we've got Scott's opinion there. I think that does it. Anybody else that you feel the need to shout out or that you're disappointed in me for not bringing up?
I don't think so.
All right,
I think
let's move on. Thank you. Okay, let's move on and talk about some wide receivers here. So the chalk, Drake London, 25% owned, again, 6,700 against Carolina. One of the better possible matchups. How do you feel about Drake London?
Yeah, he's an awesome play. It's just look at his usage and volume since week 2, and he's a high end wide receiver 1. He's priced as the wide receiver 12 on the slate in a nuts matchup. It's just pretty obvious.
Yeah. Nothing more to say there. Darnell Mooney, obviously, same matchup with Carolina. He's 5,300, leads the team in route participation. Pretty strong usage in terms of target share. Also, how do you feel about Darnell Mooney at 5,300?
Yeah, he might actually have the better matchup in comparison to London, just because he's really their deep threat. Whereas Drake London's not. Carolina's giving up the 5th most fantasy points per game to receivers on the deep ball. Mooney has almost 3 times as many deep targets per game. Just a great spot. Mooney, since week 2, he ranks top 10 in both XFP per game, fantasy points per game, just like an obvious value. I know our ownership projections are high, but I haven't really heard any other site hype him up as much as we have. And this has been the case since the offseason. Like, Mooney is one of my highest owned best ball players. So yeah, I feel really good about him. This makes me like Cousins doubles quite a bit. Just a great, I was talking with Derek Brown before the show about like the massive slop fest potential this game offers. That's kind of flying under the radar. And people in comments are talking about Leggett. So yeah, obviously, if you go back over to the ownership projections, you'll see Deontay Johnson, who flopped last week, but before that had 13 plus targets, 22 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. I still think he's like an amazing play, amazing value, but you have to wonder about that ankle injury. This is what I always said about Deontay, like maybe his, what was it, rookie sophomore season, he was underpriced every week. Every week I jammed him in. Every week he hit 4x value. And like I tweeted out, I'm like, Deontay only does one of 2 things. He either gets double-digit targets and hits 4x value, or he spends time in the blue medical tent. And so you have to worry if maybe the down game last week was ankle related. He's only practiced in a limited capacity this week with the ankle. And so Xavier Leggett is an obvious pivot or leverage play. And he's a really strong one. You look at what he did in his last game. Volume was really strong. He scored 18.6 fantasy points, ran 40% of his routes from the slot. It's a top 7 slot matchup. So he's a good play.
3% owned there for Leggett. Yeah, he got hurt last week, so the numbers for last week look a little bit off, but that's just because he got hurt in the middle of the game. Now good to go this week.
It was
so
early in the game. I think it was after like 5 routes.
2 weeks ago, he was awesome though. So awesome usage. Yeah. Actually, I wanted to ask you about Ray McLeod also. As long as we were talking about this game, we've talked about London, Deontay, Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod coming in at 15% ownership. He's 4,300. What was his role last week? 9 targets still last week. I mean, he just, for whatever reason, Ray McLeod is a real thing this year. 82.5% route participation on the year, 31 targets on the year. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, all this hype for Kyle Pitts, and then it's 3 other Falcons receivers smashing him in usage, volume, production. Ryan Heath really likes him. It's a really good schematic matchup for him. Volume's underrated. I mean, part of this is the quarterback just threw for 500 plus yards. So you look at all these numbers, it's going to be inflated. I just feel quite a bit more confident in the other 2, but Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe he's the guy. He's what, kind of like a PPR cheat code. He's like a Wandale Robinson type.
I was
So
going to
like,
say, he seems like the type you would hate.
yeah, exactly. So the upside doesn't strike fear into my heart.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Outside of that game, so we covered that one pretty thoroughly. Chris Godwin getting 19% ownership, 6,900 against New Orleans. How interested are you in Chris Godwin, or alternatively Mike Evans, who is coming in? Where's Mike Evans here? 3% ownership at 7,300. Do you like that as a pivot? How do you feel about these guys?
I wouldn't play Evans as a one-off. I might consider it for Baker Mayfield teams. It's just Marshawn Lattimore owns his soul. It's disgusting. Like, if you look back since Marshawn Lattimore joined the NFL, I think Evans scored more than 12 fantasy points once against the Saints. His numbers against them are half that against his other two divisional opponents. It's just like really bad. And so you have to think Lattimore shadows. I think Godwin has one of the highest floors of any wide receiver on the slate. You can quibble with the upside. I think it's fair to do that, but it's just, it's a great on paper matchup for him. It's a great schematic matchup. Volume should be funneled in this direction with Evans theoretically being shut down. And so, yeah, good play. Yeah.
We're most talking about DraftKings here, but people were talking about Tyrone Tracy earlier. So I just want to give a shout out. Yeah, if Devin Singletary is out on FanDuel, because that the Sunday Night Football game is going to be on the FanDuel slate.
Oh, are we a FanDuel show now?
Well, people kept bringing them up, so I just want to say, like, this, it's not FanDuel not included on the DraftKings slate. Sorry, the Giants game not included on the DraftKings slate. But yeah, he would be, if Devin Singletary is out, because people kept bringing him up. Yeah, Tyrone Tracy would be a really strong play.
Darius Slayton is a top 3 value for us on FanDuel. Chase doubles are really expensive, but no one is playing that after it just broke the slate last week in a good matchup. So I really like targeting that game.
Yeah. Him Jones says Evans gets hurt 90% of the times he plays Lattimore
or thrown out of the game.
Yeah, right. All right. Jaden Reed. Let's talk about the Green Bay receivers in general. So you have Jaden Reed, seems to be the pretty clear lead receiver for the Packers. He's 7,000 projected for 15% ownership. We do have Romeo Doubs back this week, back from suspension. He's 5,200 projected for 1% ownership. We have Dontavian Wicks projected for 6% ownership, also 5,200. And then Christian Watson, I think, is still questionable. I have not seen the doctor's update on Twitter yet on Christian Watson, but I think he's questionable at this point. If we assume Christian Watson is out, how much interest would you have in? Well, let's start with Jaden Reed. I guess you're probably interested in Jaden Reed either way, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the Packers receivers outside of him as well.
Yeah, Reed averages 19.4 fantasy points per game over his last 11 games with Jordan Love. That's mid-range wide receiver 1 production. It's a great game environment. The matchup's really good. This is a sort of Arizona's an underneath funnel, which works in Reed's favor. They also cannot get pressure, which really works in Reed's favor. He gets like a 200% boost to his fantasy points per route run on non-pressure dropbacks. The TLDR is just like, this is a player I love. Like, he was not an Exodia for me. I was way too low on him. And then he had that one big play week 1. And I was just like, oh my God, how did I miss that? And so every single week in the everything report, I'm like, do everything you can to buy him in your redraft leagues. This is the new Deebo Samuel. He's such an outlier, especially by the XFP stuff, but outliers win championships, baby. And so, I'm just going to love him every single week. If Christian Watson's back, I don't think you can play anyone else except for the tight end. If not, you could take a chance on Dontavian Wicks. I had that stat where it's like, if he had perfect hands, he'd be averaging at least 25 fantasy points per game these last 2 weeks, and probably closer to like 33. Everything we wanted last week when I went just about all in on him was there. Led the team in targets, ton of air yards, ton of valuable end zone targets. And he just couldn't hold on to the ball. Not a lot of accurate throws on Love's part either. But again, this is an underneath funnel, so it wouldn't be a great matchup for him. So he wouldn't be too high on my radar overall.
What about Romeo Doubs? So just from a narrative perspective, like he doesn't project all that well, but there's a part of me that's like, well, Jordan Love like has loved Romeo Dobbs throughout their time together. Talked about, you know, having Romeo Dobbs in on the perfect play. He would want Romeo Dobbs out there. Now a week off suspension after complaining, you know, maybe the kind of the squeaky wheel. He was complaining about his usage. He runs all the routes anyway. Any chance that Romeo Dobbs sees more usage here?
Yeah, I think that's a fine thesis. We've seen the squeaky wheel narrative like really pay off. My only question is like, when has he ever exceeded 18.5 fantasy points on DraftKings? So I just don't. He doesn't strike fear into my heart, and like that's really the important thing with DFS is these had to have it scores, and I just don't see him being one of those. Because remember when every other site with their sims and the optos, it's all medium projection based, and we have a clear edge when we focus on upside.
Yep. You talked about Jaden Reed being your favorite quarterback. Terry McLaurin coming in at 14% ownership. Is he your favorite stacking partner with Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, great play. He leads the NFL in air yardage share. He's averaged 17.5 fantasy points per game since week 3. And keep in mind, that's with Jaden Daniels dropping back at one of the lowest rates in the league because these games aren't competitive. This game is competitive. He has the second most fantasy points per game on deep passes behind only Jamar Chase. And that's despite not the highest catchable throw rate on these targets, which is weird because Jaden Daniels has been one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league this year. But anyway, I say all this to lead into the fact that Baltimore is a top 2 schedule adjusted matchup for wide receivers, and they're giving up the second most yards per game to receivers on deep passes. So everything aligns nicely for a potential Terry McLaurin game.
On the other side of that one, Zay Flowers coming in 12% ownership, 6,500. What's your level of interest there?
Yeah, this was my stat on him. Is in games Derrick Henry received 20 plus carries. Zay Flowers is averaging 3 targets and 15 yards per game. But in those other 3 games, Flowers hit double-digit targets each time. He finished 2nd, 7th, 9th in XFP. That's like elite usage and volume. And so I think it's more of a Derrick Henry week personally, but certainly could go the other way. It could be a shootout. These are 2 of my all-time favorite quarterbacks who are playing at the highest level of anyone. Sidebar, I haven't heard anyone bring this up, but I just keep thinking about it. I don't think it's something to factor in, but I was talking to, I had this tweet where I was talking about how with Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson, they only need to be good passers because of their threat as runners. It's sort of like in the UFC where you see like an elite striker go up against an elite grappler and their striking game just looks like dog shit. It's just that threat of the takedown like really changes your whole approach. It like nukes you of your typical effectiveness. Anyway, I talked to Scott DiBenedetto, one of our writers, one of our charters, who spent the last 10 years as a scout with the Browns. And he said like, all that's true, but one of the underrated components is NFL teams just don't see it a whole lot. And so they're like typically unprepared for it. Like this is the sort of, it's like Navy and Army with the triple option, right? You need to spend like weeks preparing for this. And so I wonder if it's different just because both defenses have had a ton of practice reps up against the same sort of archetype of player. But anyway, that was just a weird aside for my own
That's interesting.
amusement.
Yeah,
okay,
no,
you liked it. I thought I just
yeah, no, like the fact that the defenses have actually been practicing against this like type of quarterback is very interesting. Yeah, hadn't
that's my
that.
only fear with it, with it going under. But again, I think one of the key cheat codes is just stack up a quarterback, one of these 2 quarterbacks, and or play Derrick Henry on every single lineup. But yeah, I think Flowers works great on 9 non-Henry lineups. That reverse or anti-correlation, whatever it is just obscene. So I like that. Yeah.
How about the CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, any other, Jalen Tolbert, this Dallas-Detroit game? How do you feel about the receivers in this game?
Yeah, I think CeeDee Lamb might be my favorite GPP play wide receiver of the week. It's either him or Derrick Henry, I guess, but it's just, he's kind of sucked this year, and he only has 2 more targets than Jalen Tolbert the last 2 weeks. I think Ferguson might even have more over the last 3 or 4. And it's just been really underwhelming. And you wonder how much the prolonged holdout might be playing a role in this. Kind of Dak Prescott has hinted at it. And so all that's not great. What is great is everything else. This is one of the most, Dak Prescott we know is like this, but CeeDee Lamb is also like this. One of the most home versus road sensitive wide receivers since the start of last season. 27.5 fantasy points per game at home. Most of any wide receiver. It's like 50% better than on the road. The matchup is perfect. Detroit is giving up a league high 25 DK fantasy points per game to opposing wide receiver ones. Not only that, schedule adjusted, click on slot, baby. Most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers. Although I have to note his slot usage has dropped every single week and was, I think, at like 40% last week, which is a little concerning. But then the schematic matchup is also amazing. Detroit plays man coverage at the 4th highest rate. No one is more man sensitive than CeeDee Lamb. Since the start of last season, 4.63 yards per route run against man. That is insane. That is unbelievable. As opposed to against zone, it's like a 132% boost. That's also most. So most man sensitive, going to see a lot of man. Just add it all up, and it just looks like the picture perfect spot. And so I think another rule you can experiment with is, well, maybe not. Derrick Henry, CeeDee Lamb, 2 guys I absolutely want to be paying up for this week.
Okay, so you like CeeDee Lamb. What about Amon-Ra?
Yeah, I like him. I just like CD significantly more. There's a narrative here that's flying under the radar. I haven't heard anyone else talk about it. Shout out to Theo Greminger. But if you listen to the Amon-Ra St. Brown, Equanimous St. Brown podcast from this summer, he talked about hating Jordan Lewis and how he can't wait to just obliterate him or go to war with him this season because that dude was disrespectful to him, talked more shit and was more disrespectful than any other cornerback he's faced. And so he has that sort of chip on the shoulder narrative. I could definitely see him going off. I think you could stack it with CeeDee Lamb. I just prefer Lamb. This Detroit is like one of those MME cheat codes. Like if I was an MME player, I would be playing Detroit at such a high rate every single week. Because like that's your edge as an MME player. But for us, or for me, who's more single entry 3 max, it's really tough to kind of, because it's such a potent offense, but it's so spread out. It's hard to pick the right guys, but then that also kind of reduces your upside for each individual player. So definitely have Lamb a couple of tiers ahead, I'd say.
Okay.
I might like AJ Brown more than Amon-Ra. He also has a nuts matchup. We talk about scheme sensitive wide receivers. Almost no one's more scheme sensitive than he is when it comes to single high. Should be fully healthy off of the bye week. It's Denzel Ward might be out, so like boost him even further if that's the case. Yeah, I think Ryan Heath actually thinks like Jalen Hurts flops this week. I don't know. But I could definitely see AJ Brown going nuclear. Like even if Hurts is just mediocre in this game, it's really more of a matter of can Cleveland keep this competitive? And then if not, no, it's Saquon Barkley week. So that's another one of those potential cheat codes to make your lineups work.
I know Graham Barfield had a tweet this week about the great matchup for AJ Brown as well. So he's with you on AJ Brown. Could be great. I think he's at 3% projected ownership. I think that's really interesting for AJ Brown. What about Devontae Smith? Any interest there at 6,800?
No, I just see more upside for Brown, but you can argue he's the play. You could get too lost in the weeds with these scheme stuff. Like I think the single high matters more, but it's also Cleveland has this great pass rush. And so like one of the craziest stats is since the start of last season or 2 seasons ago, Devonta Smith's like target share on pressured throws is like 80%. And like AJ Brown has like a 0 yards per route run. It's crazy because he has those longer, those routes that take longer to develop. So that really hurts him. I don't know if anyone appreciates these musings, but yeah, TLDR is I prefer AJ Brown. Okay, thank you.
What about wide receiver twos in the Dallas Detroit game? Any interest? I mean, Jalen Tolbert, as you said, has had really great usage in the past few games. Jamison Williams has been breaking out this year, and he's down at 3% ownership at 5,800. Do you have any interest there in the wide receiver twos in the Detroit Dallas game?
Yeah, he was great last week. Top 15 in XFP.
Talking about JMO or Tolbert?
Oh, I'm sorry, Tolbert. Yeah. Okay. Only 2 fewer targets than Lamb over the last 2 weeks. He's playing really well. He ranks 8th best among all wide receivers in slot ass. And we have the narrative where Lamb missed just about all of training camp. And you've seen that from the holdout wide receivers as their first read target share has plummeted. And Dak Prescott talked about this. He was like, yeah, typically the wide receiver I spend the most time with in an offseason has the best year. And this year that was Tolbert. But yeah, 5K, he's definitely the best wide receiver play from, I think, that 5K, give or take 500 range.
Interesting. You like him better than like Leggett or Ladd McConkey, Cortland Sutton. I'm just trying to think of the
I like him more than all those guys. I'd say Leggett would be second favorite.
What about JMO, 5,800?
Yeah, it could happen. Again, this is just me as like a single entry 3 max guy, but it's so tricky with these Detroit players.
Yeah, I think that is fair. I brought up Ladd McConkey. What were we going to say?
No, Ladd McConkey. Ryan Heath loves him, loves the schematic matchup. I love the player. It's just this offense is stuck in the Stone Ages. They're averaging 17.5 catchable targets per game. That's basically half the Seahawks. So like he could have a 30% target share. That's still equivalent to like 15% target share with the Seahawks. So that's the big concern with him.
Either of these Saints receivers playable with Spencer Rattler at quarterback, Rashid Shaheed, or Chris Olave?
Yeah, Olave was my Galaxy Brain wide receiver of the week. Spencer Rattler had some like insane comments where he was just like literally, I am just going to force feed Chris Olave the ball. And that's notable to me. And I think it's interesting that Spencer Rattler last year, that's all he did. He just force fed Xavier Leggett the ball. Leggett had 4 times as many receiving yards as the next closest player, and he was rewarded for that. He had a 13-point yard per attempt average when targeting Leggett, 126.3 pass rating. When targeting anyone else, it dropped to 6.5 and 92.7. Olave's smashing an ass. It's a top 5 matchup on paper. It's just a matter of, does Ritter suck? Which he very well could without these offensive linemen. But I think the target share will be there. And then if you did want to play Rattler, I like that stack. Although maybe Rashid Shaheed, our boy, is just, despite this hip injury, just the clear alpha. But I think it's an Olave week if it's anyone.
Yeah, with all of the quotes, it seems promising for Olave.
Because you get guys like that, especially rookies, who just lock on to one guy.
My cheat code is throw into my best receiver. Could happen for sure with Olave. Couple of the spots I want to touch on. Houston. So we have no Nico Collins in this game. Stephon Diggs coming in at 6% ownership at 7,400. We have Tank Dell at 6,200 coming in at 5% ownership. Seems like both should, kind of see a step up in usage here. Any interest in Diggs or Dell?
Yeah, I kind of like Dell. There's been a lot of talk this week about, Diggs isn't fully healthy from that injury, the Pollard, Mark Andrews injury, and it's going to take another several weeks or months until he's close to full health. And maybe that's the case, but he was definitely banged up the last 3 weeks with this rib injury. I talked to my Texan source. It was like, bro, I saw the bruise. It was disgusting, but he's good now. No, he's fully good now, at least from that injury. So that's encouraging. And we saw last year, we saw massive spike weeks without Nico Collins. Dell himself had that 14 target, 36% target share game. Noah Brown had multiple games with 22 plus fantasy points without Nico, who only missed 2 games. My sources are also telling me Christian Gonzalez shadows Diggs, at least on the 40% of perimeter routes he runs, maybe even in the slot. And so if you were going to gamble on one of these, I do like Dell.
All right, everybody in chat wants to talk about Calvin Ridley. I was going to bring up Calvin Ridley as well as DeAndre Hopkins, because I think so. Calvin Ridley obviously has had great usage, but DeAndre Hopkins up to, I want to say, 52% route participation in week 4. Then they had the week 5 bye. I kind of think we might see a little bit more. We might see DeAndre Hopkins continue to bump up a little bit in route participation usage here. What was it? Where DeAndre Hopkins, 52.2%. That was his highest yet in week 4. Now, by week, we're in week 6. So it could see that jump up quite a bit. Do you have any interest in DeAndre Hopkins or Calvin Ridley being the one that people are wanting to talk about?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I did a podcast earlier in the week with Jacob Gibbs and Ryan Heath. Those are really the two best analysts to come out in a really long time. They're brilliant since Jake Tribby's rookie season. Those guys are absolutely so smart. And so at the end of the show, they were like, you need to keep up for one player who's going to go off this week. Jacob said DeAndre Hopkins. And so let me just make the case for how I get it. So he led the Titans in targets in back-to-back games. That was despite a 45 to 50% route share. So he clearly wasn't fully healthy. Maybe after the bye, he gets that full route share this week. And then he has an elite schematic matchup. Houston plays cover 4 at the league's highest rate. And who are they playing this week? Am I right?
Colts. Playing the Colts this week.
Sorry. And so he just smashes the coverage shell. They play the most. And that's been true for really, he also dominates the Colts throughout his career. That said, I think Ryan Heath made the better, more persuasive argument where it's like, well, it's also an ideal schematic matchup for Calvin Ridley, and also a better on paper matchup because he's the guy used deep and they're most vulnerable deep. It's also a squeaky wheel narrative. And so again, you could play Will Levis doubles, but it's also, if I had to pick a favorite, I would go Ridley, and I'm not a Ridley guy. I just think it's just the perfect spot for him. But again,
what is the squeaky wheel narrative? I missed it.
Was Callahan just talked up getting Ridley more involved.
Okay, nice, interesting. I think both are pretty. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins 5,100 also. Both coming in at 1% ownership. I think elsewhere we see Ridley a little bit higher than 1%.
Yeah, I think they're going to be owned this week.
Yeah, I think we could see a little bit more than what's showing here.
Ryan's article was free this week, so
yeah,
he's going to be like 6% at least.
Yeah. George Pickens against the Raiders. Any interest there?
I think it's interesting. I think Pickens is super underrated. There is that drama, and so maybe there's a squeaky wheel component.
Yeah.
He ran like 55% of his routes from the slot. It's a slot funnel. So I'm not going to play him, but I think that he deserved that shout out.
Yeah. And then, I mean, Colts, all these Colts receivers have really tough matchups. Now it sounds like Michael Pittman miraculously is going to play potentially this week, at least practicing. So we don't really know the situation. I was ready for Ascot, Adonai Mitchell to become a thing. If both Pittman and Downs missed the game. Sounds like maybe everybody is healthy. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on Colts receivers?
Yeah, I think if we get Downs or Pittman out, I'm going to play Adonai Mitchell just because he's the Ascot and he's too cheap. And when you're the Ascot, you have massive big play potential, especially at a 3,700 price tag. It's a worst possible matchup. And Snead could be shadowing one of these wide receivers. Maybe it's him. But if we get that, I'm going to have exposure.
Yeah, coming in 5% ownership, so not completely unowned. Adonai Mitchell, 3,900 on DraftKings. Okay, any other receivers that you want to talk about?
I think Amari Cooper deserves a shot every week. It's just this super valuable, highly volatile role that lends itself towards spike weeks. Great volume, tons of air yards. You just need Deshaun Watson connect on one or two of those. It's also a really good matchup. Eagles getting beat deep. I mean, you could just keep fading him. It hasn't hurt you at all fading it, because Deshaun Watson is maybe the worst quarterback in football, but one of these weeks he's going to go off. So every GPP show just needs to mention him every single week. Jalen Polk, like Adonai Mitchell, is another ass god. And so we've seen an uptick in usage. And so if Drake May kind of helps this offense take a step forward, I think he's the guy. Marvin Harrison Jr., no one really on him. Great schematic matchup for him. Jari's going to shadow. I don't know. Jari's kind of struggled this year. Is coming off an injury. Might not even play. But great game environment. So, and he's really, really smashed in single high and done nothing in two high. And heading into the season, we speculated that would be the case. And so I think there's something real to that.
Yeah, it looks like it's, I mean, based on so far this year, it's been a really nice matchup playing against Jair Alexander. So based on so far what's happened this year, actually a nice shadow matchup for Marvin Harrison. Now, obviously not the case in the past. Who knows? Maybe he'll improve at some point. Yeah, Marvin Harrison, somebody that I was going to bring up. Debro brings up Luke McCaffrey in a slot funnel matchup. 61% route participation in week 5. Any interest there for Luke McCaffrey?
Yeah, he's another ass god too. It is a great matchup. I just don't really trust a guy who's 61% route share and hasn't had more than 3 targets in any game. And it's low ADOT, low upside targets, but could be.
Yep. All right. Any other wide receivers?
I don't know. Not off the top of my head.
All right. Yeah, I think we covered anybody that I had any real interest in. Just scrolling to see if I see anybody else, but no, I think we covered all the more interesting receiver plays. Let's move on, talk about some tight ends. So Jake Ferguson, mega chalk, 31% projected ownership at 5,000 for Ferguson in a great matchup with Detroit. How do you feel about Ferguson this week?
Yeah, I mean, he's no doubt the best tight end play of the slate. The hole you could poke in it is he's very scheme sensitive. He does better against 2 high than single high, whereas CeeDee Lamb is reverse. So maybe it's a CeeDee Lamb week and you don't need Ferguson. Maybe the Tolbert Lamb double is better at lower ownership. But
yeah, I'm showing that this schedule adjusted stuff here. Not so far this year, not great schedule adjusted matchup for the tight ends. I feel like tight ends, it's always feels like a smaller sample size than like receivers in general. Just like kind of depends on how much usage they happen to get that game. So this early in the year, I'm not too worried about it. But how much do you factor in schedule adjusted fantasy points against for tight ends in week 5, week 6 now?
Yeah, not a ton. With tight ends, so this is a really valuable, really predictive tool, but it's least valuable, least predictive for tight ends. I really just stick to top 3, top 5, bottom 3, bottom 5, and like only when it makes sense. And like I look at the tight ends they face, or it's like, oh, they have Bobby Wagner, or they have an elite tight end stopper. So
yeah. All right, let's go back to, so he's the chalk, but then we have K Dotton at 19%. I mean, that feels too high to me. Do you agree? Do you like K Dotton at 19% ownership?
Yeah, it's disgusting. Gross. Yeah, but hey, I mean, Evans being shadowed by Lattimore, the volume's really been there. He's an undeniable value, but hard to get behind K Dotton at 19%.
Debro thinks Dalton Schultz is going to crush, coming in at 4% ownership. Has seen pretty solid usage whenever one of the top receivers is out. I think saw 5 or 6 targets last week with Nico Collins limited to 9 snaps. Any interest in Dalton Schultz?
Yeah, I wasn't super excited about it personally.
I think it's interesting. I think I'll have more than 4% that the field is at. Not like a smash play for me, but just because he had better usage last year. His target share was higher last year than it has been so far this year, and then we saw it come back up last week with Nico Collins limited. So I do think like he's probably going to be basically last year's Dalton Schultz. So which I think at 4,100 would be a pretty solid play. So I think I have some interest there in Dalton Schultz. We do have
he had that one spike week. But it was a game CJ Stroud threw 470 yards and 5 touchdowns. So if Stroud isn't doing that, I question the upside personally.
Fair. Tucker Kraft, I mean, Now we have Luke Musgrave out for the foreseeable future. He's 4,800, 10% projected ownership. Nice enough matchup with the Cardinals. What's your level of interest there?
Yeah, he's a great play. We went all in on him last week and worked out well for us. So even with the wide receivers back, Luke Musgrave's out, so the route share will be there. Tight end sucks, dude, but he's strong, good value, has upside.
I have a tight end play that I didn't write up this week, have not talked about on a single piece of content that I'm sort of starting to galaxy brain my way onto. Sam
Spicy.
Laporta getting like no ownership with a lot of injuries to Dallas's defense, including Micah Parsons. Kind of feels like this could be a sneaky good spot for Sam Laporta. Do you have any interest there at 5,500?
Yeah, I think he's interesting. Listen, he missed just about all of training camp with a bad hamstring, and then he suffered an ankle injury in week 2. He should be fully healthy after the bye. And Detroit, the most honest coaching staff in football, was asked about Laporta's lack of involvement. It's like, well, we just really couldn't get him into the game plan these first 3 weeks because he hasn't, he missed so much at training camp. So, week 1, we had earmarked as the Jamison Williams week, and then week 2 we had as the St. Brown. And so, blah, blah, blah. Maybe this is the week after the bye. It's like, okay, this is the Sam Laporta week where they go into the game with that in their head. Or at the very least, it's just, hey, he's finally healthy and he's 500 cheaper than he was at tail end of last year because, he hasn't played great through those injuries. Great game environment. I could see it. I think that's a strong 2-3% play.
Yeah. Like best tight end all of last year in fantasy. Kind of interesting to me. Somebody, again, just haven't talked about it now. I'm like, as we're talking about, like, man, that's sort of interesting. Just with Micah Parsons out, becomes more intriguing to me. Zach Ertz, I know you like Jaden Daniels. Going to be going to any Zach Ertz at 10% ownership.
Yeah, he is a great matchup. Great schematic matchup. The Ravens play cover 4 plus cover 6 at the league's highest rate. Ertz averages 3.04 yards per route run against those coverage shells. He's below 1 against everything else. So Ravens giving up the second most yards per game to tight ends. He ranks 9th in targets. Saw 8 last week. The thing is, the guy just gets 0 yak on every single target he gets. So I question the upside, but tight end sucks. So is what it is.
Jatavian Sanders, 6% at 2,600.
Yeah, if Ian Thomas is not back this week, I think he's a good play. If Thomas is back, it's probably a little too thin for me. But with Tommy Tremble picking up a concussion last week, his route share jumped to 71%. Saw 5 targets. That was just 1 off the team high. I think if you play him, you're really not expecting much of anything, and that's fine. It's just the tight end position has been so bad this year, and he's the cheapest one, so that's good.
Yeah. Are we finally going to see a Kyle Pitts week against Carolina?
I wouldn't want to be betting on it, but it could happen. That would suck for me and my Mooney and London love.
True. 4% projected ownership seems pretty playable to me against Carolina.
I mean, that was the thing is like last week, everyone was like, Kyle Pitts is back. And it's like, yeah, he better be. The quarterback threw for 500 yards. Yeah. And it's like, even then he was 4th on the team in targets, and 2 wide receivers had double his fantasy points, and then 2 more were within 3 points of him. So yeah, whatever.
Yeah, still, even in a big spike week, wasn't that great, but great matchup here. So I have to at least think about it. A couple other pay up options, Trey McBride and Brock Bowers. What's your level of interest there?
Yeah, I really like Brock Bowers. I think he's who we all wanted Kyle Pitts to be. I think he's awesome. I think he's really good. I think this role is really good. Ranks 3rd in XFP per game, 3rd in fantasy points per game, 2nd in yards per route run. No Michael Mayer, no Devontae Adams means he's a full-time player, 75% route share or better. Aiden Connell's the starting quarterback. I think that's interesting just because last week when O'Connell came in, he targeted Bowers 26% of the time. So really locked in on him. Tough matchup for Jacoby Myers if Adams is out, drawing that JPJ shadow. Top 6 matchup on paper. I just love the player. That's kind of really all I need to say. But
yeah, looks good. Anybody else?
Trey McBride, solid too.
Yeah.
It's just he's seeing the best usage of any tight end in fantasy. He's also like the biggest positive regression candidate. It's a little weird he's been so unproductive despite this good volume. You have to think it's going to come eventually. You look at the schedule adjusted stuff, it looks like a good matchup. Although again, we talked about single high. McBride's actually not scheme sensitive at all, but maybe it's more of a MHJ week. MHJ.
Sure. Yeah. MHJ week. Yeah, could be. Any other tight ends? I feel like there's not that many great tight end plays here. Anybody else you like though?
Yeah, I got a gal brain. I don't know that I'm going to play it, but I'm excited to talk about it. That's David Njoku. You got to worry about the health, but he suffered another game-ending injury last week, and so he's basically only played 3 full quarters of work. And in those 3 full quarters, 6 targets, 5 of which were first read targets, 4 catches, 29 yards. He did that on only 19 routes, which is a 0.32 target per route run average. That is behind only Malik Neighbors and Rashee Rice. So elite usage when he's been on the field, they've been force feeding the ball. It's just he hasn't been able to stay on the field. Like this might be one of your best ball league winners just because of how much every other tight end is underwhelmed. But Njoku, don't forget, he closed out last season averaging mid-range, like putting up mid-range wide receiver 1 numbers over his last 4 games. So worry about the knee and ankle injuries, but I just don't think anyone's going to play him, and it's interesting.
Anybody else at tight end?
No, I don't think so.
All right, should we build some lineups?
Let's do it.
All right, let's roll. Okay, so Jaden Daniels, your favorite quarterback. I think we should just start there. Daniels and McLaurin.
Got it.
Do you want to do a bring back?
Yeah.
Derrick Henry or?
Yeah.
All right, so we're paying up. Going to need to find some value here.
No, let's throw Lamb in here too. Let's not do that.
Do you want to? Do you want to try?
Yeah.
See if it's possible.
Let's do
39.40 left per player.
Let's do Irving plus Buxty.
We'll see if this is possible.
Oh, it's possible.
You've already made the lineup, haven't you?
No, I haven't. I really haven't. I'm just thinking we could play Jatavian Sanders.
Yeah, if we need to. Do you want to go there right now? Just go down.
So Adonai Mitchell, Polk, probably a must.
Who's your favorite between those two?
Mitchell. But you have to. What are the rules here, Neil? If Downs and Pittman both play, you gotta pull them out.
Swap out. Okay. So now we have 3,900. So if we go to Jatavian Sanders, we don't even need to go that cheap.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a double. We could get Ertz in there.
True. And then we could put Polk in there. I think would fit.
How much is McConkey or McCaffrey?
Oh, so we have 4,100 left for our flex. I think McCaffrey would. So Schultz could be there. Where's McCaffrey? $3,700. So he would fit there. That'd be a triple sack. We would have to. Okay. We would maybe get off of Ertz if we wanted to.
How much is Njoku? You want to just do a gross?
He's 4,200.
Oh, okay, we just missed him. All right, take Ertz out. Throw Jatavian in there.
Okay. So now we have 5,200 left for our flex. So that would be
Hopkins,
Wicks, Dobbs, Hopkins, Tolbert, Ferguson.
You just missed Gibson.
Yep.
You just missed Mooney. All right, screw it. Do we need chalkiest defense of the slate?
We don't.
Look at that.
So then we could go, I mean, Patriots.
Cardinals might not be terrible, dude. Let's see. Let's pull up our defense projections. We didn't talk defense.
We did not talk about defense. So sort of by fantasy points, Saints projected the best. They're also 2,700. So Brown's actually at
We've
20%.
gotten complaints about our defense projections because like we are way misaligned with the industry, but we've been tracking our projections this year and we've had the best defense We've also had the best projections if you exclude all players below 6 projected points. We've been beating everyone this year. So shout out Chris Wecht.
Yeah, Wecht.
I think we're second best among all players, but among the players who matter, 6 projected points or more, we're the best. Shout out us.
So with all that said, if these projections have been crushing it, would we want to go to Cardinals? I mean, the Browns would allow us to do a little bit more if we want to take the Browns against Philly.
Okay. I just worry that they're quiet quitting in protest over the quarterback.
That is a concern. Actually, yeah, allows us to get Dobbs.
No, let's get Mooney in there and just find the best.
Yeah, where's Mooney?
And we'll play Cardinals defense. Like I said, Love has kind of sucked this year. Like production's good, but not throwing accurate.
Nice
balls.
leverage on a lot of people playing Green Bay players too.
Yeah,
we don't have any. Yeah, so we've got the Daniels stack with Terry McLaurin, bring back of Derrick Henry. We've got the chalk Bucky Irving, who looks pretty good. CeeDee Lamb, probably the best pay up option. Adonai Mitchell, who we will swap off of if Pittman and Downs both go. We've got Jatavian Sanders, just kind of a salary saver. Also correlates with Darnell Mooney in the flex. So really nicely correlated lineup. Use the full salary cap. I think it looks good.
Boom. Love it.
All right. Do we want to do? Well, we've been doing three lineups on the show. So let's do another quick one here.
Your turn.
All right. My turn to lead a lineup here. Where do I want to go? We talked about Jordan Love. So we did Cardinals defense in the last one. No, let's go Will Levis. Let's try the Will Levis double stack and see what we can do if we go that way.
Throw Adonai Mitchell on it for good measure.
We won't need to throw Adonai Mitchell on, I don't think.
You're right.
We can think about it, but let's not do it immediately. Let's just think about whether, because Titans have such a good defense, I think we could just skip the bring back, but we'll think about it.
Good call. Good call.
Probably not Pollard in this one because we're going double stack here. So maybe back to Bucky again. I mean, this could be, we talked about doing a double pay up running back lineup. So maybe this is when we should do that.
Yeah, I like it.
Derrick Henry, your favorite pay up running back?
Yeah, and Saquon too.
Yep.
Right?
Throw those in there. So now we have 45.50 left per player. That's plenty. Could just, I mean,
you want to do Irving Buxty just to show us what we could do.
Yeah, we could do that again. Yep. All right, so now 5,200 left per player. Could do Tucker Kraft, Kyle Pitts, Jake Ferguson. Who do you like here?
Let's do Bowers. No, let's do Kraft.
I mean, we could fit Bowers, but start with Kraft. 5,400 left with a wide receiver and a flex.
You want to throw London in there? I just want to see what we could do.
Sure. 4,100 left at flex.
How much is Mitchell again? 36, 37,
39.
You can do that. What about take London out, throw Irving in the flex?
Take London out, throw Irving in the flex. Yeah, let's see. So 5,400 left at receiver. Mooney is 5,300. Could do that.
Could play him again. What about your boy Alec Pierce? The dude has led the team in receiving in 3 of 4 games. Broke the slate twice.
Yeah, and he's done it against in tougher matchups too.
No, this is the toughest.
Yeah.
He's a correlated bringback.
He is. He's super correlated.
And he's like the mascot of the show, Neil.
I hate that he has become my brand because I mentioned him once and now, but he's been so good. It's worked out this year that it's actually like, all right, fine. I guess I'll lean into it. But man, it scares me.
That's the one thing that works when Anthony Richardson is quarterback.
Yeah,
deep
true.
And that's what he does. He's good at it. I don't know. Mooney is definitely a better play, but like for a milli for correlation,
Fine. 4 milli for correlation.
Someone else steal this lineup and play Mooney. We're gonna go with
It's better. It's better with Mooney,
Yeah.
I think. But we'll do it for the correlation. All right. And then let's do one more here. All right. Where do we want to go
Dak,
here?
Cousins, Love.
Let's go
Baker.
I'd say either Dak or Love would be my preference.
Let's go Dak.
Okay. Dak, CD. Do we want to double stack it with Ferguson?
Well, you just played Love, but maybe that was fate
I did.
telling us we should play Love.
I didn't mean to play Love.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't believe in accidental clickbait. Jalen Tolbert or Jake Ferguson?
Maybe we'll figure that part out later. But
okay,
maybe slightly into Tolbert, to be honest.
All right, that works for me.
You figure out the Detroit component.
Yeah, I was just trying to think.
Let's do Tolbert and Laporta.
Yeah, oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
it's a Millie lineup.
It is. Yeah, that's a perfect kind of Millie maker type play. All right, 48-40 left per player. Because we went with Tolbert and Laporta, we kind of bring down the overall ownership of the lineup, so we can probably afford to play Bucky again.
Okay, Bucky.
If we want to.
Bucks D, easy.
We want to throw Tony Pollard in this one?
If you want.
5,400 left per player. We can't afford to really.
If you want to chalk running back, Chuba, Bijan, Pollard.
Yeah, we could do Chuba. We haven't done that yet. I like to play.
Okay.
And then maybe Mooney and then somebody else in the flex. So we'd have Chuba with Mooney.
Okay. Or yeah.
And then we have 4,600 left in the flex. Kind of an awkward price tag.
All right, take him out.
All right, instead of Mooney, we go to Ray McLeod.
No.
Wait, who was it? Oh, Tolbert was your favorite in this price range, right? The 5,000.
Yeah, but Legette's also there.
Yeah, Legette. Let's try that. Legette gives us a 5,000 flex, enough to play Ferguson, McConkey, Kraft. I don't know. Do you like McConkey the best? We could get away from Chalky Bucks D too.
Yeah, maybe that's the move. But McConkey's playable.
We get up to Saints D then. That's the only move up we can get there.
No. What about down? Go down.
Saints D, the highest projected defense on the slate per fantasy points.
Interesting. Again, that doesn't make sense to me, but we've had the best projection so far, so whatever.
There's still Cardinals there, Browns there. We already did those two, I think. Patriots, sort of interesting.
Yeah, let's just see what we could do with Patriots.
Yeah, then we could get up to Wicks if we wanted to in the flex.
It's still too low on Mooney. All right, take Hubbard out. Fuck Hubbard.
Pollard there?
Sure.
All right, Pollard there. Now we have 5,500 left for the flex. Javonte.
Was that Javonte or JMO?
JMO's 5,800.
Okay.
We could. I mean, Gibson is there. We could go to Mooney here and then upgrade at defense.
All right, whatever you want to do. I like this lineup.
Yeah, I think it's looking pretty solid. Let's do that. Let's do Mooney and the defense upgrade. Just gets us up to the chalk Bucks, but makes sense. Correlates with Bucky Irving. Yeah, looks good. So now we have Dak double stack with CeeDee Lamb and Tolbert. We have Sam Laporta bring back. We also have the Legette in there with Darnell Mooney, so some correlation there. Tony Pollard. We've got Bucky Irving with Bucks defense. So really, really well correlated throughout. I think Tony Pollard is the only piece of this lineup that's not correlated with anybody else in the lineup. So really, really strong lineup. Let's do it. Let's win a milli.
All right, let's do it, Neil. You're the
All
boss.
right. There you have it. 3 lineups in, 3 lineups out. We're out in under an hour and a half. I can get suited up and off to my wedding. Not my wedding, somebody else's wedding that I'm going to out of town. Scott, what do you have going on the rest of the weekend? Where can people find your stuff?
Scott Barrett, DFB on Twitter, fantasypoints.com. Doing a show tomorrow morning with John Proctor. What about you, Neil?
Yeah, I just put out just before we got on the stream on my YouTube channel, the Flannelverse. I put out a showdown video breakdown, about half an hour of the Sunday morning football game in London. So I did get that out, just a quick one. But I'll have my Sunday night football article out tomorrow on Fantasy Points. I'll also be doing another live show 90 minutes prior to the Sunday night football game. So you can find all that on my YouTube channel, the Flannelverse. And at Fantasy Points is the written stuff. That's where you'll find me the rest of the weekend. All right, that is going to do it for Outside the Box Week 6. This has been our shortest show ever, maybe. I don't know, probably not ever, but our shortest show of the year. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Sorry about the short show, but I think we did a pretty good job. We covered everything that I wanted to cover, at least. And of course, if you haven't checked out Scott's full breakdown, that's on the Fantasy Points. If you just go to fantasypoints.com, it is on the main page there. So go check that out if you haven't already done so. Okay. Thanks, guys. We will see you in week 7.
Boom. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.